Alright, so I got some pretty horrific updates here for you guys out of the hospital system inside Gaza that at this point is basically in a free fall. It is collapsing amid Israel's ongoing bombardment and invasion and siege of the Gaza Strip. So here from Truth Out, they basically are going to transcribe a segment that was done by Amy Goodman over at Democracy Now! That includes some testimonies from people who are working inside these hospitals that I think is pretty valuable. So here from Truth Out, they say Gaza's two largest hospitals are under a complete siege by Israeli forces and are no longer functioning. Palestinian health officials have also accused Israel of using snipers to shoot at people inside Al-Shifa hospital, which is the largest hospital inside Gaza, where thousands of displaced Palestinians have sought refuge. So this was a place where not only were they treating thousands of patients, they were also hosting people who were in and around the hospital who were trying to take refuge there because everywhere else is getting bombed into oblivion inside Gaza. And now the Al-Shifa hospital is obviously not safe either. Okay, so they continue. They say Israel has claimed that Hamas runs a command center below the hospital, though this has been denied by hospital staff, and Israel has not publicly released any evidence behind the claim. Dr. Fidel Naim of Al-Ali Al-Arabi Hospital says that surgeons are forced to operate in hospital corridors with limited anesthetic supplies. So this is something I touched on before. I've heard testimonies of doctors who are having to perform amputations, surgeries on children in these hospitals, in front of their parents, where they have no anesthesia, where the children are screaming out in pain in ways that you cannot even fathom, because they are having to go through this bombardment right now. This is what Israel is doing, sniping at people in and around the hospitals that are trying to, in some cases, I saw videos of people who are trying to leave the hospital, and these refugee areas surrounding this hospital, they were trying to leave to go through one of these pretend humanitarian corridors, and they were waving white flags, and they were shot at by Israeli forces that are in the area. They continue saying that, unfortunately, we couldn't help many of these patients. Many of them died because we couldn't do anything for them. We also hear from Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan, a pediatric intensive care physician with Doctors Without Borders who has worked in Gaza and the West Bank. She is a co-founder of the social media account Gaza Medic Voices, saying, quote, anyone who tries to leave the hospital is targeted. We have descended into a very dark era for humanity. And so here we have Amy Goodman, obviously for Democracy Now!, and she says Gaza's two largest hospitals, Al-Shifa and Al-Quds, have stopped functioning as Gaza's health system collapses under relentless Israeli bombardment and blockades. On Saturday, Al-Shifa hospital ran out of fuel, forcing doctors to remove dozens of premature babies from incubators. Let me say that again in case you don't understand the barbarity of what is currently happening. They ran out of fuel, and the doctors were forced to remove dozens of premature babies from their incubators. 6 premature babies have already died as a result of this. Doctors are now struggling to keep more than 30 other babies who are there alive. They say that Palestinian health officials have accused Israel of using snipers again to shoot at people inside the hospital complex where thousands of displaced Palestinians have sought refuge, and Israel has claimed again that Hamas has this command center below the hospital. So obviously, Israel has been saying that Hamas operates everywhere that they have bombed. Everywhere. Schools, UN shelters. There have been some instances of them outright saying that UN workers are Hamas. Okay? In mosques, in churches, everywhere that you could possibly imagine that Israel has bombed, killing thousands of innocent civilians, 4,500 at least children so far. They just turn around and they say, well, Hamas was there. There was a Hamas tunnel under it. There was a Hamas weapon there. And so they think that gives them a justification to do that. Now, I want to say, obviously, there's no evidence whatsoever that has been presented to anybody that there is some sort of a Hamas command center under Al-Shifa hospital. But I'll say this, even if there was, that does not give you the right to do this to these innocent people who are receiving care, to these innocent doctors and nurses who have been working beyond overtime for the last month, who are in brutal conditions right now, being traumatized on a daily basis. And it also doesn't give you the right to do this to the innocent babies who you are currently killing as a result of your siege and bombardment of this hospital. It doesn't give you the right to do that just because you allege that there's a Hamas command center under the hospital. I mean, what the fuck are we even talking about here? They say on Sunday, Dr. Mohammed Abid, A surgeon with Doctors Without Borders described the dire situation inside the hospital. He said the situation is very bad, and we don't have connection. There is no internet. Sometimes we have cell phone reception. We're on the 4th floor, and also there's a sniper who attacked 4 patients from inside the hospital. One of them has a gunshot directly in his neck, and he has a quadriplegia. They shot a quadriplegic man inside this hospital in the neck, according to this doctor. And the other one, he had a gunshot wound in the abdomen. And some of the people which actually go outside the hospital and they want to go south, they bombed them also. They bombed the families from Al-Shifa hospital today in the morning. There is no electricity, there is no water, there is no food, so our team is exhausted. We have had 2 neonatal patients die, actually, because of the incubators. It's not working because there's no electricity. We've had adult patient die in the ICU. He died because the ventilator is shut down because there is no electricity. We can see actually the smoke around the hospital. They hit everything around the hospital and then they hit the hospital many times. Again, they say that was Dr. Mohammed Abid, a surgeon with MSF, which is Doctors Without Borders. And now we have another testimony, okay, from Dr. Fadel Naim, who said, we are at Al-Ali Al-Arabi Hospital, the Baptist hospital, which was, by the way, the one that we spent like weeks debating. Oh, was this a PIJ misfired rocket that caused this explosion at the hospital, or was it Israeli bombardment? Okay, we spent weeks debating that. In the meantime, I'm not even kidding, Israel has bombed dozens of other health facilities. Dozens and dozens and dozens of times, okay? We spent weeks debating whether or not it was the PIJ misfired rocket or it was Israel, and they were saying, oh, we would never bomb hospitals. And then, since then, they spent weeks and weeks and weeks justifying bombing dozens of other hospitals. So, I mean, that was just a complete fucking waste of everybody's time. And that's part of sort of the distract method that they use in situations like this, to try to sow chaos, to sow confusion around all of this, right? They say all the injured people and other people, like people with high blood tension or diabetes or diarrhea or anesthesia or children with dehydration, cancer patients, patients with kidney failure who need dialysis, pregnant women, and other cases are coming to the hospital because they have no other possibility to go to other hospitals because they've been fucking destroyed, or they don't have electricity, or they don't have fuel. The other hospitals are surrounded by Israeli tankers, like the biggest hospital in Gaza, Shifa Hospital, and the Al-Nasser Pediatric Hospital. Some of the hospitals are closed because of the shortages in fuel and equipment, and since yesterday we received more than 300 or 400 people and tens of other people who have had other health problems. We had to do some surgical interventions in the corridors and the courtyard because of the shortage of anesthetic drugs. Okay, and this was another thing that was pointed out by many of these doctors who are bravely, in certain circumstances, like outright risking their lives or losing their lives to stay behind with the patients who they know if we flee south as Israel has demanded that we do, then these patients are going to die. So a lot of these doctors have stayed behind, and they've also given testimony about, it's not even just the people who are being injured, who are being, put to the brink of death by current injuries from Israel's bombardment and their invasion, but it's also people before that. I mean, there were children who, and adults for that matter, who had cancer, who had diabetes, who had all of these other ailments that were being treated in some of these hospitals. They can't get treatment. I mean, think about that. You have kids who are getting cancer treatment who now can't get cancer treatment, and obviously their cancer is going to worsen as a result of that. I mean, that alone could potentially cost them their lives if the bombing doesn't cost them their lives. I mean, this is just, it is so depraved at the deepest level you could possibly imagine. He says, our biggest problem is a shortage in manpower. Because we are a small hospital, we're not prepared to receive such numbers of patients at one time. Many volunteers came, but we need specialized doctors in all of these different fields, and some people died because we couldn't do anything for them. So, I mean, that's the current situation with some of the largest hospitals left standing inside Gaza right now. We also have this, just as a reminder that they saw this coming, especially in terms of the premature babies on incubators, right? Which is also deeply ironic, I think, because if you guys remember, I mean, I wasn't even alive, or I was alive, but I wasn't even old enough to, witness this in real time. But this was a core part of one of the justifications for the invasion of Iraq. Is some people were giving testimony saying that Saddam Hussein and his people were taking babies off of their incubators and killing them, right? That was one of the allegations that later turned out to be completely fabricated, completely made up. And you think about that, right? That was one of the justifications for invading Iraq and killing hundreds of thousands of innocent people by the United States of America. And now we have a situation where we are watching in real time babies who are supposed to be on functioning incubators who are dying in front of us because of what Israel is doing. and the US government has nothing to say about it. We also had things like this. World leaders have known for a full month what would be happening today with these babies on the incubators. And just as a reminder, the ex-Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, when he was asked, what about those Palestinians who are in hospitals on life support and babies on incubators that will have to be turned off because Israel has cut the power to Gaza? And he said, are you seriously asking me about Palestinian civilians? That's what he said. Are you seriously asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? This was the ex-Prime Minister of Israel. We also had this here. We are nearly sure that we are now alone. No one hears us. The problem is to be sure that we can evacuate neonatal patients because we have 37 to 40 premature babies. This was one of the testimonies that we heard coming out of Al-Shifa hospital. I'll just play a little bit of this.
Connection, there is no internet. Sometimes we have some reason on the call phone. We're on the fourth floor, and also there's a sniper who attacked 4 patients from the inside the hospital. One of them has the gunshot directly in his neck, and he has a quadriplegia. And the other one, he has a gunshot in the abdomen.
So this is what we were just reading about in that initial article there. Direct testimony from some of the doctors on the ground. This is a visual of what some of these babies who are supposed to be on an incubator here, who are now, I guess the doctors on scene are doing the best that they can to try to wrap them up, to try to keep them in as safe as a position as you possibly could in this kind of a barbaric situation. So that's a visual of that. We also had here, as pointed out by Ryan Grimm, a tragic update from the Al-Shifa hospital with a doctor killed and others pinned down by IDF fire. He says Dr. Hammam Alo, a physician in nephrology at Al-Shifa hospital, has been killed by an Israeli airstrike this morning with his father in his house next to the Al-Shifa hospital. His mother, who is also a doctor, Dr. Haifa Al-Sarraj, is trapped with other relatives, including children, in the vicinity of the house. They are unable to move, and any attempt to move comes under heavy Israeli fire. One relative is also currently alive and trapped under the rubble. They've been in touch with the Red Cross, who are unable to evacuate them, and the IDF needs a ceasefire in this neighborhood so that they can be safely evacuated. So this is what's happening. We just had recently, this exact person, Dr. Hammam Alo, was just a couple days ago on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, talking about why he decided not to leave, okay, so that he could stay behind and care for his patients. This man is now dead, okay, because he had the bravery to stay behind to do what he thought was right as a doctor. Let's listen to a little bit of this.
You go with your family south.
And if I go, who treats my patients? They are not animals. They have the right to receive proper health care. You think I went to medical school and for my postgraduate degrees for a total of 14 years, so I think only about my life and not my patients? I'm asking you, ma'am, do you think this is the reason why I went to med school? To think only about my life?
The bravery that it requires to be a doctor in this position, to be willing to lay down your life, to risk your life. And he's dead now. The bravery that it takes to be able to be in that position, I can't even imagine. And so this is some of the shit that's happening right now on the ground in some of these hospitals. I mean, it's you know, to call it barbaric is an understatement. I think this was another good point here by Crystal Ball. She says the targeting of Al-Shifa hospital is also likely to make it even more difficult or impossible to track Palestinian deaths and injuries, as the office of the person who tracks and reports this data is located in the hospital. So now, on top of all of that, you know, horrifying shit that we just went through, now you also have the prospect of it being more difficult, and maybe this is part of the goal, to track how many people have been killed so far by the Israeli bombardment, by the Israeli invasion, and by the Israeli siege, and the cutting off of all of this equipment, medical supplies, and electricity, and food, and water, and the rest of it. So I don't know how to characterize this other than some of the most grotesque displays of inhumanity that I've seen in my entire lifetime. You know, this is entirely backed up and endorsed and funded and given diplomatic cover by the United States government. And so I think it's important more now than ever that people continue to stand up, raise your voices, bring awareness to this kind of shit, protest if you can, take direct action if you can, because this shit needs to stop.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying